Vanessa's hands shook as she stared at the brightly painted rainbow house across the street. Just yesterday, it had been a simple, beige bungalow, unremarkable, like the rest of the cookie-cutter homes lining the suburban block. But now, it was an eyesore, a bold affront to the tidy, uniform aesthetic of the neighborhood. She watched, seething, as her neighbor, Alia, proudly admired her work, happily adding more splashes of vibrant color to the facade. Vanessa's blood boiled. How dare she? This was unacceptable. Gripping the edge of her kitchen counter, Vanessa's mind raced. She had to do something, had to stop this madness before it spread. Her family had lived on this street for generations, and she wasn't about to let some newcomer, with no respect for tradition, ruin the carefully curated look they had all worked so hard to maintain. Jaw clenched, Vanessa stormed out of her house, marching across the pristine lawn towards Alia's obnoxious display of self-expression. As she approached, Alia looked up and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Vanessa. Isn't it a gorgeous day? I'm just finishing up the trim on the house. What do you think?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Think? I think it's an absolute disgrace, is what I think. This is a respectable neighborhood, Alia, and you've turned your house into some kind of carnival attraction." Alia's brow furrowed in confusion. "But I thought the colors were so fun and vibrant. I wanted to bring a little bit of joy to the block. Is there a problem?" "A problem?" Vanessa scoffed. "Of course there's a problem. This is completely out of place. It looks. She searched for the right words, her face flushing with indignation. "It looks too ethnic." Alia's eyes widened, and her expression shifted from confusion to hurt. "Too ethnic? What's that supposed to mean?" Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. "You know exactly what I mean. This isn't the kind of house we had on this street. It's inappropriate, Alia. I'm sorry, but you need to paint it back to a neutral color immediately." Alia stared at her, stunned. "Inappropriate? Neutral? Vanessa, this is my home. I can paint it however I want. I'm not going to just cover up my culture to make you or anyone else comfortable." "Your culture?" Vanessa sneered. "This isn't about your culture, it's about respecting the neighborhood. We have standards here, Alia. Standards that you're clearly unwilling to uphold." Alia's grip tightened on her paint roller, her knuckles turning white. "Standards? So, you're saying my house, my family, my very existence is unacceptable here? Is that it?" Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but Alia cut her off. "You know what? Forget it. I'm not going to argue with you. This is my home, and I'm going to keep it exactly the way I want it." She turned back to the house, dipping her roller in the vibrant blue paint. "If you have a problem with that, that's your issue, not mine." Vanessa watched, seething, as Alia resumed her work, the colorful strokes a bold statement of defiance against the pristine, beige-toned conformity of the neighborhood. Her jaw clenched. Vanessa knew she couldn't let this stand. She had to do something, anything, to restore order and preserve the carefully curated image of her community. Vanessa stormed back into her house, her mind racing with possibilities. This couldn't be allowed to happen. Alia's rainbow-hued house was an affront to everything Vanessa held dear: the carefully cultivated aesthetic, the unspoken rules of the neighborhood, the very idea of maintaining propriety and decorum. She paced the length of her living room, racking her brain for a solution. Calling the HOA was an obvious choice, but Vanessa knew they would likely side with Alia, citing her right to do as she pleased with her own property. No, she needed something more permanent. As her gaze landed on the framed photograph of her family, a plan began to take shape. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the ornate silver frame, her knuckles turning white. This was about more than just a house, more than just aesthetics. This was about preserving the very fabric of their community, the delicate balance that had been maintained for decades. Vanessa knew what she had to do. Striding purposefully to her office, She booted up her computer and began searching through local real estate listings. If Aaliyah insisted on refusing to conform, then perhaps it was time for her to find a new home, one more suitable to her preferences. Hours later, Vanessa emerged from her office, a triumphant smile on her face. She had found the perfect solution. A charming, traditional home on the other side of town, well outside the boundaries of her meticulously curated neighborhood. All she had to do now was convince Aaliyah to see the wisdom in her plan. With renewed determination, Vanessa marched back across the street, fixing Aaliyah with a steely gaze. "Aaliyah, we need to talk." Aaliyah paused, her paint roller dripping onto the fresh coat of vibrant turquoise. "About what, Vanessa?" "I've been thinking, and I believe I have a solution to our little problem." Vanessa gestured towards the rainbow-hued house. "This clearly isn't the right fit for our neighborhood. But I've found the perfect place for you, just a few miles away. It's a lovely, traditional home, much more suitable to your tastes." Aaliyah's eyes narrowed. "My tastes? What are you talking about?" "Well, let's be honest, Aaliyah. This house of yours is simply too loud, too attention-grabbing. It doesn't fit in with the rest of the homes on this street." Vanessa gave a sympathetic smile. "I'm only thinking of you. And of course, the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood. Surely you can understand that." Aaliyah stared at her, disbelief and anger etched across her face. "Understand? You think I'm going to just pack up and move because my house doesn't fit your idea of how things should look? Vanessa, this is my home. I'm not going anywhere." Vanessa's smile faltered. "But Aaliyah, surely you can see the wisdom in what I'm suggesting. This other house, it's perfect. Bigger, newer, and in a much more appropriate area. It would be a fresh start for you, a chance to really make it your own." "A fresh start?" Aaliyah scoffed. "You mean a chance to hide away where I won't bother you and your precious neighborhood aesthetic?" "Well, I'm sorry, Vanessa, but that's not happening. This is my home, and I'm staying right here." Vanessa felt her composure slipping. "Aaliyah, please be reasonable. This is for the good of the entire community. You're simply not." She paused, searching for the right words. "Fitting in." Aaliyah's grip on the paint roller tightened, her knuckles turning white. "Fitting in? Is that what this is all about? Vanessa, I'm not here to fit in. I'm here to live my life, in my home, the way I want to. If that's a problem for you, then that's your issue, not mine." Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, but Aaliyah cut her off. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a house to finish painting." With that, Aaliyah turned her back on Vanessa, dipping her roller in the vibrant green paint and resuming her work. Vanessa stood there, seething, her carefully constructed plan crumbling around her. Aaliyah's defiant refusal to cooperate only fueled her determination. She would not be deterred. Somehow, someway, she would find a way to restore order to her neighborhood, even if it meant taking drastic measures. Vanessa stalked back to her house, her mind racing with possibilities. She couldn't let Aaliyah's blatant disregard for the neighborhood's standards stand. This was about more than just a house. It was about preserving the very fabric of their community, the delicate balance that had been maintained for generations. Sinking into her favorite armchair, Vanessa steepled her fingers, her brow furrowed in deep thought. She had to find a way to convince Aaliyah to see reason, to understand that her bold, colorful house was simply unacceptable. But the woman's stubborn refusal to budge had left Vanessa feeling increasingly frustrated and powerless. As she gazed out the window, watching Aaliyah's steady brushstrokes transform the house into a dazzling array of hues, an idea started to take shape. Vanessa straightened, a determined glint in her eye. If Aaliyah wouldn't listen to reason, then perhaps it was time to take more drastic measures. Picking up the phone, Vanessa scrolled through her contacts, her finger pausing on a familiar name. With a resolute nod, she pressed the call button, her lips curling into a triumphant smile. Hello, Michael. It's Vanessa. I have a situation that I think you can help me with. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Later that evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Vanessa watched from her kitchen window as a sleek black sedan pulled up in front of Alia's house. The driver, a well-dressed man with a stern expression, stepped out and made his way to the front door, clipboard in hand. Vanessa's heart raced with anticipation as she saw Alia emerge, a puzzled look on her face. The two exchanged words, Alia's gestures becoming increasingly animated as the man continued to speak. Vanessa leaned forward, straining to hear the conversation, but the distance and the gathering twilight made it impossible. After several tense moments, Alia's shoulders slumped in defeat, and she reluctantly ushered the man inside. Vanessa's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Whatever the man had said, it had clearly struck a chord with Alia. As the lights in Alia's house flickered on, Vanessa turned away from the window, her mind already whirring with plans for the future. With Alia properly warned, she was confident that the woman would see the error of her ways and finally comply with the neighborhood's standards. But just as Vanessa was about to settle in for the evening, a sudden commotion outside caught her attention. Peering out the window, she watched in horror as a small army of workers descended upon Alia's house, wielding ladders, paint rollers, and an array of power tools. Vanessa's blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. Alia wasn't giving in to the man's demands. Instead, she was doubling down, throwing caution to the wind and embracing the vibrant colors with even greater fervor. Vanessa's hands gripped the windowsill as she watched the workers swarm over the house, painting with a frenzied energy. The once serene block had descended into chaos, and Vanessa felt her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. This was not the outcome she had anticipated. Alia was supposed to see reason, to understand the importance of conformity and propriety. But instead, she had chosen to defy Vanessa's efforts, to flaunt her disregard for the neighborhood's standards in the most brazen way possible. Vanessa's jaw clenched as she realized that her carefully laid plans had backfired. Alia was not only refusing to back down, but she was actively escalating the conflict, daring Vanessa to do her worst. With a sinking feeling, Vanessa knew that she had no choice but to take this fight to the next level. The stakes were higher than ever, and she couldn't afford to back down now. Somehow, someway, she would find a way to restore order to her neighborhood, even if it meant resorting to more extreme measures. The next morning, Vanessa awoke with a renewed sense of determination. Though Alia's defiant actions had sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, she was not about to be deterred. This was her community, her domain, and she would do whatever it took to maintain the carefully curated image she had worked so hard to cultivate. Grabbing her phone, Vanessa scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Her finger hovered over the call button for a moment, then she took a deep breath and pressed it, bringing the device to her ear. Hello, this is Vanessa. I need to speak with the HOA president immediately. It's an urgent matter. After a brief exchange, Vanessa was connected to the stern, no-nonsense voice of the HOA president, Mrs. Wilkins. Vanessa, what can I do for you this morning? Mrs. Wilkins asked, her tone clipped and businesslike. Mrs. Wilkins, I'm calling about the situation with my neighbor, Alia. Vanessa began, her voice laced with a mix of concern and indignation. As you know, she's painted her house in this absolutely appalling rainbow color scheme, and it's causing a real problem for the rest of the neighborhood. Mrs. Wilkins let out a heavy sigh. Yes, I'm aware of the situation. Several other residents have already brought it to our attention. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it. As long as Alia is staying within the parameters of local zoning laws, she's technically within her rights to paint her house however she pleases. Vanessa felt her blood boil. But Mrs. Wilkins, you can't be serious. This is a clear violation of our community standards. Surely, there must be something we can do to force her to repaint it to a more appropriate color. I understand your concerns, Vanessa, Mrs. Wilkins replied, her tone measured and diplomatic. But the fact is, we can't simply override an individual's property rights because we find their aesthetic choices distasteful. That would open us up to all sorts of legal and ethical issues. Vanessa gripped the phone tighter, her knuckles turning white. So you're telling me there's nothing the HOA can do? We're just supposed to sit back and let Aaliyah ruin the entire neighborhood with her garish display? I'm afraid so, Vanessa, Mrs. Wilkins said, her voice tinged with sympathy. Unless Aaliyah's actions are in direct violation of our covenants or local ordinances, our hands are tied. I'm sorry, but there's nothing more I can do. Vanessa felt her heart sink as the realization dawned on her. The HOA was powerless to intervene, and Aaliyah's defiant act of self-expression was being allowed to stand. Well, thank you for your time, Mrs. Wilkins, Vanessa said, her voice trembling with barely concealed rage. I suppose I'll have to find another way to address this situation. Before Mrs. Wilkins could respond, Vanessa ended the call, her mind racing with a flurry of new possibilities. If the HOA couldn't help, then she would simply have to take matters into her own hands. Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she stared out the window, watching Aaliyah's brightly colored house mocking her from across the street. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. She would find a way to restore order, no matter what it took. Over the next few days, Vanessa's obsession with Aaliyah's colorful house only grew. She spent hours poring over local ordinances, searching for any legal loophole that could be used to force her neighbor to repaint. But try as she might, she could find nothing that would give her the leverage she needed. Frustrated and feeling increasingly powerless, Vanessa decided to take a more unconventional approach. Reaching out to her network of contacts, she began inquiring about alternative methods of persuasion. Methods that didn't necessarily adhere to the strict letter of the law. It was through these shadowy connections that Vanessa was introduced to a man named Hector, a self-described fixer with a reputation for getting things done, no questions asked. Vanessa was initially skeptical, but as she listened to Hector's smooth, assured tone, a glimmer of hope began to take root. Look, Vanessa, I understand your frustration, Hector said, his voice low and conspiratorial. The system isn't always equipped to deal with these kinds of challenges. But I might be able to help you out if you're willing to get a little creative. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Creative? What exactly did you have in mind? Hector chuckled. Nothing too extreme, I assure you. But sometimes a little well-placed pressure can go a long way in getting someone to see reason. I had my ways of persuading people to see things your way. Vanessa hesitated, her conscience warring with her growing desperation. Aaliyah's house was a blight on the neighborhood, a glittering affront to everything Vanessa held dear. And if the HOA and the law couldn't help her, then perhaps she had no choice but to explore more unconventional options. All right, Hector, she said, steeling her resolve. What do you have in mind? Hector's grin widened. Leave it to me, Vanessa. I'll make sure your neighbor gets the message, loud and clear. Over the next few days, Vanessa watched from the safety of her own home as a series of strange occurrences began to befall Aaliyah's property. First, it was a rash of accidental damage to the newly painted facade. A chipped window here, a scraped section of wall there. Then, Aaliyah's landscaping seemed to fall victim to a sudden and mysterious infestation, her once lush garden wilting and dying before her eyes. Vanessa observed it all with a mixture of guilt and grim satisfaction. She knew, deep down, that Hector's methods were likely less than savory, but the thought of Aaliyah finally learning her lesson was enough to keep her conscience at bay. As the pressure mounted, Vanessa could see the strain beginning to show on Aaliyah's face. The woman's once vibrant spirit seemed to dim, and she spent more and more time tending to the increasingly damaged and neglected aspects of her home. Vanessa couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Aaliyah was finally starting to understand the consequences of her actions, of her refusal to comply with the unspoken rules of the neighborhood. Perhaps now she would see the error of her ways and finally paint her house a more suitable color. But just as Vanessa was beginning to feel a glimmer of triumph, a new development shattered her fragile sense of control. One morning, as she gazed out her window, she watched in horror as a large dumpster was delivered to Aaliyah's driveway, followed by a crew of workers armed with power tools and paint cans. Vanessa's heart sank as she realized the truth. Aaliyah wasn't giving in. Instead, she was doubling down, stripping the entire house of its vibrant hues and preparing to start anew, with an even bolder and more defiant color scheme. Vanessa's hands trembled as she watched the scene unfold, her carefully laid plans crumbling around her. Hector's persuasion had backfired, and now Aaliyah was more determined than ever to stand her ground. Vanessa knew then that she had no choice but to escalate her efforts. This was a battle she couldn't afford to lose, not when the very fabric of her community was at stake. With a steely glint in her eye, she turned away from the window, already plotting her next move. As the days passed, Vanessa's obsession with the situation only grew more intense. She found herself consumed by thoughts of Aaliyah and her defiant rainbow house, unable to focus on anything else. Hector's previous persuasion tactics had clearly backfired, only serving to embolden Aaliyah further. Now, with the house stripped down and the workers preparing to apply an even bolder, more vibrant color scheme, Vanessa knew she had to take more drastic action. Pacing the length of her living room, Vanessa racked her brain for a solution. She couldn't allow Aaliyah to win, not when the very identity of the neighborhood was at stake. This was about more than just a house. It was about preserving the carefully curated image that Vanessa and her fellow residents had worked so hard to maintain. As she stared out the window, watching the progress on Aaliyah's house, an idea began to take shape. It was risky, to be sure, but Vanessa was desperate. She had to do something, anything, to stop this madness before it spiraled completely out of control. Grabbing her phone, Vanessa scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the call button and brought the device to her ear. "Hello, Officer Granger. This is Vanessa from Oak Street. I have a situation that I need your help with. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk." The next morning, Vanessa watched with bated breath as a police cruiser pulled up in front of Aaliyah's house. Her heart raced as Officer Granger, a stern-faced man she had known for years, stepped out and approached the front door. Vanessa leaned forward, straining to hear the exchange, but the distance and the commotion of the ongoing work made it impossible. She could see Aaliyah's face, however, and the confusion and apprehension that flickered across her features. After several tense moments, Aaliyah ushered the officer inside, her body language tense and defensive. Vanessa felt a surge of triumph. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. Surely Aaliyah would have no choice but to comply with the law now. But as the minutes ticked by, Vanessa's sense of victory began to waver. The police cruiser remained parked in front of the house, and she could see no visible signs of the confrontation she had anticipated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the front door opened and Aaliyah emerged, flanked by Officer Granger. To Vanessa's dismay, the woman's expression was not one of defeat, but of resolve. Aaliyah said something to the officer, gesturing emphatically, and Vanessa watched as the man's features softened, a sympathetic look crossing his face. He nodded, reaching out to give Aaliyah's arm a gentle squeeze, before turning and heading back to his car. Vanessa's heart sank as she realized that her plan had failed. Somehow, Aaliyah had managed to convince the officer that her actions were justified, that the brightly colored house was not, in fact, a violation of any laws or ordinances. Gripping the windowsill, Vanessa felt a surge of frustration and desperation. She had thought the police would be the answer, the final piece of the puzzle that would force Aaliyah to submit to the neighborhood standards. But now, it was clear that even the authorities were unwilling to intervene. Vanessa watched, her jaw clenched, as Aaliyah returned to her work, her movements more determined than ever. The house was rapidly transforming, the colors growing bolder and more vibrant with each passing hour. Defeated and demoralized, Vanessa turned away from the window, her mind racing with the realization that she had run out of options. Alia's defiance had triumphed, and Vanessa's carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. As she sank into her chair, Vanessa felt a profound sense of helplessness and despair. She had fought so hard, invested so much time and energy into this battle, and yet it had all been for naught. Alia was winning, and Vanessa had no choice but to accept it. With a heavy heart, Vanessa knew that she had to confront the truth. Her efforts to maintain the neighborhood's standards had failed, and she would have to find a way to come to terms with the new reality that Alia had thrust upon them all. Over the next several days, Vanessa watched in a state of defeated resignation as Alia's house transformed into a dazzling, vibrant masterpiece. The once beige bungalow was now a kaleidoscope of colors, the bold hues a defiant statement against the tidy, uniform aesthetic of the rest of the neighborhood. Vanessa's protests had fallen on deaf ears, her appeals to the HOA and the local authorities proving futile. Alia had managed to navigate the legal and bureaucratic maze, securing the necessary approvals and permits to carry out her vision, much to Vanessa's dismay. As the final touches were applied, Vanessa couldn't help but feel a sense of defeat wash over her. She had fought so hard, invested so much time and energy into this battle, only to come out on the losing end. Alia's defiance had triumphed, and Vanessa's carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. Sitting in her living room, Vanessa stared out the window, her eyes drawn to the vibrant display across the street. The colors were almost blinding, a stark contrast to the muted tones of the surrounding homes. It was a bold statement, a declaration of Alia's refusal to conform to the neighborhood's unspoken standards. Vanessa knew that she should feel outraged, indignant at the blatant disregard for the carefully curated aesthetic she and her neighbors had worked so hard to maintain. But as she watched the sunlight play across the freshly painted facade, a strange feeling began to take root within her. Instead of the anger and resentment she had expected, Vanessa found herself captivated by the sheer beauty of Alia's creation. The colors were vibrant, alive, and there was an undeniable sense of joy and exuberance that radiated from the house. It was as if Alia had taken the drab, lifeless conformity of the neighborhood and infused it with a much-needed burst of energy and individuality. Vanessa's brow furrowed as she wrestled with these unexpected emotions. She had spent so much time and energy fighting against Alia's vision, so focused on preserving the status quo that she had never truly considered the possibility that there might be value in embracing something different, something that challenged the established norms. As she continued to gaze out the window, Vanessa found herself questioning the foundations upon which she had built her worldview. Was the idea of a respectable neighborhood truly so important that it justified the suppression of individual expression and creativity? Were the rigid standards she had fought so hard to uphold really the best way to foster a thriving, diverse community? Vanessa's fingers drummed against the arm of her chair as these thoughts swirled through her mind. She had always prided herself on her commitment to maintaining the neighborhood's image, but now, in the face of Alia's unapologetic display of self-expression, she found herself questioning the very premise of her crusade. Perhaps, in her single-minded pursuit of conformity, Vanessa had failed to see the value in embracing difference, in celebrating the unique perspectives and experiences that each resident brought to the community. The thought was a humbling one, and it left her feeling unsettled, unsure of the ground on which she had so firmly stood. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting vibrant shadows across Alia's house, Vanessa felt a strange sense of acceptance begin to take root within her. She may not have agreed with Alia's methods, but she could no longer deny the power and beauty of her creation. And in that moment, Vanessa knew that she had to find a way to reconcile her own preconceptions with the new reality that had taken shape on her once pristine street. In the days that followed, Vanessa found herself drawn to the vibrant, eye-catching display across the street. where once she had seen only an affront to the neighborhood's carefully curated aesthetic, she now found herself mesmerized by the sheer artistry and exuberance of Aaliyah's creation. As she gazed out her window, watching the interplay of colors dance across the facade, Vanessa couldn't help but feel a sense of newfound appreciation, not just for Aaliyah's work, but for the very idea of individuality and self-expression that it represented. Gone was the consuming rage, the burning desire to force Aaliyah into submission. In its place, Vanessa found herself grappling with a more nuanced understanding of the situation, one that challenged the deeply ingrained beliefs she had held for so long. Perhaps, she mused, the true measure of a community's strength was not in its homogeneity, but in its ability to embrace diversity and celebrate the unique contributions of its members. Aaliyah's bold, unapologetic display had shaken Vanessa's foundations, forcing her to confront the limitations of her own narrow-mindedness. With a heavy sigh, Vanessa turned away from the window, her mind racing. She knew that she couldn't simply erase the past, couldn't undo the damage that her relentless pursuit of conformity had wrought. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance to forge a new path forward, one that acknowledged the value of individual expression while maintaining a sense of cohesion and community. Steeling her resolve, Vanessa grabbed her car keys and headed out the door, her destination firmly set. As she approached Aaliyah's house, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she refused to let that stop her. This was her chance to make amends, to bridge the divide that had so deeply fractured their relationship. Aaliyah answered the door, her brow furrowed in surprise at Vanessa's unexpected visit. But before she could speak, Vanessa held up a hand, her expression earnest and sincere. "Aaliyah, I owe you an apology. I've been so focused on maintaining the standards of this neighborhood that I lost sight of what truly matters, the people who call this place home." Vanessa took a deep breath, her gaze meeting Aaliyah's. "Your house, it's beautiful. And I'm sorry for the way I've treated you. You deserve to be able to express yourself, to celebrate your identity, without fear of judgment or reprisal." Aaliyah's eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. But then, a slow smile spread across her face, and she reached out to give Vanessa's arm a gentle squeeze. "Thank you, Vanessa. I really appreciate that." Her expression softened, and she gestured towards the vibrant house. "This is who I am, and I'm not going to apologize for it. But I'm glad you're finally able to see the beauty in it." Vanessa nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "I'm the one who should be apologizing. I was so focused on maintaining the status quo that I forgot the true purpose of a community, to support and uplift one another regardless of our differences." Aaliyah's smile widened, and she placed a hand on Vanessa's shoulder. "Well, I'm glad we're on the same page now. And who knows? Maybe this rainbow house will inspire the rest of the neighborhood to add a little more color to their lives." Vanessa chuckled, her own lips curving into a smile. "I suppose anything's possible. And Aaliyah, I'd love to hear more about the story behind this beautiful home of yours if you're willing to share." As the two women began to engage in a lively discussion, Vanessa couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and optimism blossoming within her. The road ahead might not be an easy one, but she was determined to embrace the changes that Aaliyah had brought to their community, changes that, she now realized, had the power to make their neighborhood stronger, more vibrant, and more truly representative of the diverse tapestry of human experience.